I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. What I'm about to tell you will make you think twice about underestimating an elderly mother. Old woman, don't come here. I don't need you. Just rot alone on your farm. That was the text message I received from my son on the night of December 22nd. Cold, sharp, like a slap across the face of this old mother who was busy wrapping Christmas gifts to take to the city. My name is Grace Thompson. I'm 68 years old and I live alone on a small ranch in the Texas borderlands. My neighbors who saw me standing frozen in my kitchen that night said, "Oh, honey, let it go. Kids grow up and forget about us. That's just how it is." But I didn't believe it. Not for 1 second. The son who cried his eyes out when his father died. The son who swore at his father's grave that he'd roast me the best brisket this Christmas. That son could not have written those words filled with such hate. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And you can't imagine what I found when I got to the city. If I had been offended that night and gone to bed, the only thing waiting for me the next morning would have been news of my son's cold body chained like an animal in his own shed while his in-laws partied in his house. Let me tell you what really happened before that fateful moment. Just a few hours before my phone lit up with those cruel words, I was the happiest woman in this lonely corner of Texas. Outside, the December wind whistled through the old wooden walls of my ranch house, but inside my kitchen, my heart was warm. I was polishing my old leather boots, the nice ones I only wore for special occasions. On my kitchen table, I'd already arranged the gifts I'd spent weeks preparing. A bottle of bourbon I'd aged myself for 5 years following my late husband James's recipe. A jar of peach preserves made from the fruit trees James planted 20 years ago, and a wool scarf I'd clumsily knitted for my daughter-in-law Sophie, even though I knew she preferred expensive things from the mall. 6 months earlier, my son William had come to visit. He'd wrapped his arms around my shoulders, eyes shining with that pride that makes a mother's heart full, and promised me, "Mom, this Christmas you have to come up to the city. I'm going to roast you the best brisket in the world, just like Dad taught me. We're going to put up the biggest tree in the neighborhood." That promise had kept me going through 6 long months of solitude on this ranch. William was a man of his word. Always had been. He'd never broken a promise to me, not even the smallest one. And then my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I wiped my flour-dusty hands on my apron and picked it up. The screen showed William, with that photo of him smiling at his college graduation. My fingers were shaking a little, not from cold, but from excitement. Maybe he was calling to confirm what time I should catch the bus tomorrow. But it wasn't a call. It was a text message. "Old woman, don't come here. I don't need you. Just rot alone on your farm." I read it once, twice, 10 times. My legs went weak and I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay standing. William would never call me old woman. Never. He always called me Mom or Mama when he was feeling sentimental, or Chief when he was teasing me about my years as an army nurse. But old woman, that cold, dismissive term, no. And there was something else. William was careful with his words. He'd been an English major before switching to business. He always used proper punctuation even in text messages. This message was careless, mechanical, like someone else had typed it quickly, not caring about the words. My heart started beating fast. Not from anger, from fear. I called him immediately. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached William Thompson. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Something cold crawled up my spine, that old instinct from my nursing days in Vietnam. The instinct that told you when a wounded soldier was about to crash. When death was close. I called Sophie, my daughter-in-law. The phone rang for a long time, so long I thought it would go to voicemail too. But then she answered. "Hello, Mom Grace." Her voice was wrong. All wrong. It was trembling, breathless, like someone had a knife pressed to her back. "Sophie, honey, where's William? Why did he send me such a horrible message? I'm getting ready to catch the bus tomorrow." He's sleeping." She cut me off too quickly. Her words tumbled out in a rush. "Actually, no. We're at the airport. We're flying to Miami. Emergency. Mom Grace, it's really loud here. Don't come, please. William is exhausted. He doesn't want to talk right now." She was lying. I knew she was lying. Because behind her voice, I didn't hear airport announcements. I didn't hear the bustle of travelers pulling suitcases. Instead, I heard music. Loud thumping music. The heavy bass of gangster rap, that music that glorifies criminals and drug dealers. The kind of music William hated. The kind he'd forbidden in his own house. And between the bass beats I heard a man's voice. Rough, laughing, mean. "Hang up. Tell that old hag to get lost." Then Sophie's voice again, high and panicked. "I'm sorry, Mom." Click. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen holding that silent phone, staring at the Christmas gifts on my table. The bourbon, the preserves, the scarf that had taken me 3 months of painful arthritic knitting. A normal mother might have shrugged, told herself that plans change, that kids have their own lives. She might have put those gifts away with sadness and resignation. But I'm not a normal mother. I'm a woman who spent 20 years as an army nurse who saw boys bleed out on jungle floors and learned to smell death before it arrived. I'm a woman who survived a war, buried a husband, and raised a son alone on this harsh Texas borderland. And every instinct in my old bones was screaming one thing: William was in danger. I put down my phone, walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the old green duffel bag from my army days. The one I'd kept packed for emergencies even though I'd been retired for 30 years. I didn't pack the Christmas gifts. Instead, I went to my bedside drawer, the one I keep locked, and pulled out a small black case. Inside was a compact folding knife with an oak handle. I'd carried it through Vietnam, used it to cut bandages, open supplies, and just once, to defend myself from a drunk soldier who got too friendly. The blade was old but sharp. I tested the edge with my thumb. A thin line of blood appeared. Perfect. I tucked it deep in the inside pocket of my heavy jacket right next to my heart. Then I grabbed a small first aid kit. Bandages, antiseptic, a vial of morphine I'd kept from my nursing days, technically illegal, but I'd always believed in being prepared, surgical scissors and sutures. My arthritis made my fingers slow, but my mind was sharp as that knife blade. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old woman stared back. Gray hair pulled into a practical bun. Wrinkles carved deep from 68 years of Texas sun. Hands spotted with age. But my eyes were still the eyes of that young nurse who'd held dying boys and refused to let them go without a fight. "James," I whispered to the photo of my husband on the nightstand. "If you're watching, give me strength. Our boy needs me." I left my ranch house that night, leaving behind the illusion of a peaceful Christmas. I wasn't going to visit my son for dinner. I was going to save his life. I caught the last bus to San Angelo at 9:30 that night. The old Greyhound was nearly empty, just me, a young couple sleeping against each other in the back, and a tired-looking man in work boots who smelled like motor oil. I took a seat near the middle, clutching my duffel bag on my lap. Through the window, the Texas night was black as ink. The headlights swept across dried mesquite trees and empty fields. The wind howled, bringing that cutting cold from the mountains. People think when you get old, everything dulls. Your sight, your hearing, your reflexes. And maybe that's true for some. But there's one thing that never ages, never weakens. In fact, it gets sharper with every year. A mother's instinct. They call it a gut feeling, but it's more than that. It's like when an old wolf smells a storm before the clouds gather. Like when a horse trembles before an earthquake. And tonight that instinct was screaming in my head, "William is in danger. Run, Grace, run." I reached into my jacket and touched the knife handle. Cold, rough, familiar. I'd carried this knife for 40 years, through war and peace, through the death of my husband and the loneliness that followed. It had cut rope, peeled fruit, and just once, saved my life from a rattlesnake that had gotten into my kitchen. Tonight it might have to save my son. I remembered William at 7 years old. There'd been a terrible storm, and our cow, his favorite, the brown one he'd named Butterscotch, had wandered off into the brush. I wanted to leave it, wait until morning. But William had cried, insisted we go look for her. "We can't leave her, Mom. She's family." So father and son and I had walked through rain and wind all night. When we found Butterscotch trapped in a ravine, William had jumped down without hesitation, his little hands trying to push the cow up the muddy slope. He was covered in dirt, shivering with cold, but his eyes had that fierce determination I recognized from my own reflection. "Mom," he'd said as we led Butterscotch home, "I'm never going to abandon our family. Never. A boy like that. A man like that. He couldn't have sent that message." "Hey, ma'am." The bus driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. He was young, maybe William's age, with kind eyes. "You okay?" You look worried. I tried to smile. Just nervous. My son said he has a surprise for me. I'm not good with surprises. Oh, it's probably something nice. Kids these days, they make good money in the city. Maybe he bought you a car or something. I nodded and looked back out the window. A car. A trip. He didn't understand. I closed my eyes and prayed silently, something I hadn't done since James's funeral. Lord, please protect my boy. If he's safe, I'll offer you the rest of my life in penance. But if someone has dared to touch a hair on his head, forgive me for what I'm going to do. The bus plunged through the night carrying an old mother and a fear that grew heavier with every passing mile. We arrived in San Angelo just after midnight on December 23rd. The city glowed with Christmas lights. Giant trees blinked in the town squares. Church bells rang announcing a season of peace and joy. Holiday music drifted from bars and restaurants. Families walked down Main Street holding cups of hot chocolate laughing. But none of that warmth reached me. I felt like I was watching it all through thick glass. I took an old taxi to the suburbs where William had bought his house 3 years ago. It was his pride and joy, a modest 2-story home with cream-colored siding and a neat front lawn. He'd worked overtime for 2 years driving trucks day and night to afford that house. "We're here, ma'am," the taxi driver said, slowing down. "Nice neighborhood." It was a nice neighborhood. The houses around Williams were decorated with elaborate Christmas displays. The neighbor on the left had LED lights shaped like reindeer. The widow on the right had a giant inflatable Santa waving mechanically. But William's house was different. It stood dark. No twinkling lights. No wreath on the door. The curtains on both floors were drawn tight as if the owners wanted to hide everything inside. The house looked cold, separate from the joy surrounding it. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the darkness. It was what was parked in the driveway. William's front yard, where he usually parked his spotless silver sedan, was invaded by 3 massive pickup trucks. Black, tinted windows so dark you couldn't see inside. The bodywork was splattered with red mud. That special kind of mud you only find on the border dirt roads where smugglers move. The trucks were parked carelessly, crushing the grass William mowed every weekend with such pride. And then I heard it. As I stepped out of the taxi, paid the driver, and stood before the iron gate, I heard the music, pounding from inside the house. Not Silent Night, not jingle bells. Shrill trumpets, accelerated bass, a nasal voice rapping about crossing borders with white packages, guns on belts, bags full of cash. Anyone who gets in the way gets led. The lyrics celebrating violence and drugs hammered against my ears like fists. William hated this music. He'd told me once, his voice firm, "Mom, that music is poison. It celebrates evil. In my house, songs that praise criminals will never play." Yet now his house vibrated with that dirty sound. I stood rooted before the gate. The cold wind hit my face, but cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. This wasn't a vacation. This wasn't a last-minute trip. This was an invasion. I crept closer, my old boots silent on the sidewalk. There was a tiny gap between the curtains and the living room window. I pressed my face close, squinting in the darkness. The scene inside made my blood freeze and then boil with rage. In the living room, sprawled on William's brown Italian leather sofa, the one he'd saved for months to buy, sat his in-laws. Sophie's parents. Frank Martinez, red-faced and heavy, was chugging from an expensive whiskey bottle, not even using a glass, just drinking straight from the bottle like an animal. Rosa Martinez, a heavy woman with too much makeup, lounged with a cigarette in her hand, dropping ash carelessly on William's white wool rug. The rug I'd helped him pick out. The rug he vacuumed religiously every Sunday. But the person who caught my attention most wasn't them. It was the stranger sitting with his feet propped on William's coffee table. A man about 30 years old. Bald head gleaming under the lights. A thick gold chain around his neck that looked like something you'd use to chain a dog. He wore a tank top showing off a massive tattoo, a black scorpion that crawled up from his bicep to his neck. He was using William's fruit knife, the one with the wooden handle that had belonged to James, to clean his fingernails. Laughing. Saying something that made the whole family celebrate. I recognized him from a photo William had once shown me, sighing heavily as he did. "This is Sophie's brother," William had said. "Ricardo. They call him Rico, or El Escorpion. He's bad news, Mom. He runs with gangs, does drugs. I forbade Sophie from letting him near our house." So what was Rico doing here? Why was Sophie's family partying in my son's house? And most importantly, where was William? I stepped back into the shadow of the old oak tree in front of the house. My mind was racing. I needed to see more. I needed to find Sophie. I needed to know where my son was. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I smoothed down my jacket, the one hiding the knife. I tried to make myself look like a harmless old woman making a surprise visit. Then I stepped out of the shadows and rang the doorbell. Ding dong. The bell chimed clearly, but it seemed to be swallowed by the pounding music inside. I rang again, longer this time, keeping my finger on the button. Inside, the music volume dropped suddenly. I heard rapid footsteps, whispers. "Who is it? I said we didn't want visitors." That rough male voice. Rico's voice. "Let me see, it's probably the pizza delivery." That was a woman's voice. Sophie. The heavy wooden door opened a crack. Sophie appeared wearing a thin silk nightgown with a cardigan thrown hastily over it. Her face was heavily made up, but it couldn't hide how gaunt she looked. The dark circles under her eyes, the hollowness in her cheeks. When she saw me standing there, old Grace, with her duffel bag of medical supplies, the color drained completely from her face. She froze like a statue, gripping the edge of the door so tightly her knuckles went white. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. "Grace," she finally whispered, so softly the wind almost carried the word away. What are you doing here?" I looked straight into my daughter-in-law's eyes, searching for warmth, for welcome, for anything familiar. There was nothing, just pure terror. "Hello, Sophie," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm here to see William. He sent me a strange message, and when I called, nobody answered. I got worried." I tried to step forward, but Sophie moved back quickly, blocking the doorway with her body. Her other hand gripped the door like she was ready to slam it shut. "Mom, Grace, why did you come? I sent you a message. We're at the airport. No, wait, we canceled the flight. William is sleeping. He's very tired. You should go home. We'll call you tomorrow." The lies tumbled out of her mouth, clumsy and desperate. Something about airports. Something about sleep. But she couldn't even look me in the eyes. "Sophie." I cut her off, my voice sharp now. "You say William is sleeping. Then what's that music? Whose trucks are those outside? And why are your parents and brother in this house if my son is sick?" Sophie jumped. Her eyes darted backward into the house. Fear rippled across her face. And then Rico appeared behind her in the hallway. He had a beer in one hand. His face was flushed with alcohol. He looked me up and down with contempt, and a mocking smile spread across his face, showing teeth stained yellow from tobacco. "Who is it, sis?" He swaggered forward, then stood right behind Sophie, towering over her, blowing the stench of beer and cigarette smoke into my face. "Ah, the old ranch lady. Hey, Grandma, wrong house. Nobody's buying vegetables here. Get lost." I clenched my fists. Rage ignited in my chest like fire. But I kept my voice steady. "I came to see my son. Move aside." Rico laughed. A cruel, barking laugh. "Your son doesn't want to see you. He's sick of your smell of cow manure and poverty." He turned back toward Sophie. "What are you doing? Close the door. Kick her out, or I won't be responsible for what happens." Sophie trembled. I looked at her wrist where her cardigan sleeve had slipped up. Bruises, dark purple finger marks where someone had grabbed her. Hard. "Mom, Grace, please go." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She looked at me with desperation, like she was begging for forgiveness even as she betrayed me. "Please, William is fine, tomorrow. I'll have him call you tomorrow. Just go." "Sophie," I said quietly. "Where is my son?" "I'm sorry, Mom." Slam! The door shut violently in my face. I heard the bolt slide into place. The chain rattle. I stood there alone in the freezing night. Inside, Rico's laughter rang out again, cruel and mocking. The music cranked back up to full volume as if to drown out my knocking, to mock the helplessness of an old woman. Do they think a wooden door is going to stop me? Do they think I'm going back to the bus station, crying? They're very wrong. I took a few steps backward, making a show of picking up my duffel bag and walking toward the gate. I walked slowly, shoulders slumped like I'd given up. I walked until I was hidden behind the oak trees. Then I looked around carefully. No one watching from the windows. I threw the duffel bag into the bushes. I'd come back for it later. I kept only the knife in my inside pocket and the small first aid kit in my jacket. Then, pulling up my hood to cover my gray hair, I pressed myself against the stone wall and crept around toward the back of the house. If they won't let me in through the front door, I'll find another way. And I'm not ringing the doorbell again. The back garden of William's house used to be the most peaceful place in the world. I remembered visiting 2 summers ago. William and I had pruned the rose bushes together, big beautiful roses that his wife Sophie loved. We'd watered the green lawn together, and William had shown me his vegetable patch with such pride. "Mom," he'd said, kneeling in the dirt with his hands covered in soil, "this is the only place in the noisy city where I feel like I can breathe." But tonight that garden looked like a battlefield. I climbed over the low wooden fence at the corner, my knees screaming with arthritis pain, but I gritted my teeth and stayed silent. The waning moon gave just enough light to see the devastation. William's precious rose bushes had been trampled without mercy. The green grass was torn up with deep tire tracks. The earth was plowed and churned into a mud pit. Those trucks had driven back here, not to admire the landscape, to load something heavy. I held my breath and moved softly through the shadows like an old cat hunting. The night wind was stronger back here, bringing the smell of dampness gasoline and something rotting. I pressed myself against the wall of the house and crept toward the shed in the corner of the garden. William had built that shed himself 3 years ago, just a simple structure made of pine wood to store his lawnmower and tools. He'd joked about it. "This thing will fall apart with one good kick, Mom." But as I got closer, I noticed something wrong. The rickety wooden door now had 2 iron bars bolted across it. And where there used to be a rusty old latch, there was now a brand new padlock, big as my fist, shining silver in the moonlight. Why would anyone put such an expensive lock on a shed that holds shovels and rakes? My gut feeling screamed louder than ever. I crept up to the door and pressed my ear against the crack between the pine boards. Total silence. For 3 heartbeats, there was nothing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they were hiding contraband here. Maybe clink, clink, the sound of metal on metal, chains, then a moan, low, suppressed, broken, the sound of someone dying slowly without strength. Water. The whisper was so quiet that if I hadn't had my ear pressed to the wood, I would have thought it was the wind. But I recognized that voice. Even distorted by pain and weakness, I recognized it. It was the voice that had called me Mom for 30 years. "William," I whispered, my lips pressed to the wood. "William, is that you, baby?" The moan stopped. Silence stretched for 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then a soft knock on the wood from inside. Tap, tap, and then a sob. The cry of a lost child finding his mother. The cry of despair finding hope. "Mom! Mama!" The world crashed down around me. My son. He wasn't in Miami. He wasn't sleeping in a warm bed. He was here, in this filthy, freezing shed, just yards from his own house where invaders ate and drank and laughed. Tears filled my eyes, hot and burning. But they dried immediately, leaving room for something much more terrifying. Fury. Pure, cold, ancient fury. I stepped back and looked at the padlock that imprisoned my son. I touched my pocket, feeling the oak handle of my knife. Tonight there will be no silent night. Tonight there will be no mercy. Tonight the devil is going to meet a mother. I stood before that shed door trembling, not from the cold that bit through my jacket, from the broken sound coming from inside. My son's voice, the cry for help of a trapped animal. I had to get in. Now. But that shiny new padlock mocked me like the devil's eye. I touched the knife in my pocket. No. The blade was sharp, but it couldn't cut through reinforced steel. I looked around in the dim moonlight. In this corner of the garden, William had always kept tools scattered about. There, under the thick bougainvillea vine, I spotted a rusty iron bar, maybe part of an old clothesline, about half a yard long with a flat tip. I grabbed it, feeling the cold metal in my calloused hands. The same hands that had held surgical instruments in field hospitals. The same hands that had closed my husband's eyes. These hands would save my son. I returned to the door. I didn't try to break the padlock, it was too strong. Instead, I aimed at the latch. William had built this shed with cheap pine, and after several rainy seasons, the wood was half rotten. I wedged the tip of the iron bar between the metal latch and the wooden door frame. I took a deep breath, concentrating all my strength. The strength of a woman who'd carried wounded soldiers, who'd lifted her sick husband, who'd worked a ranch alone for 5 years. "Open up," I hissed through my teeth, "or I'll tear you apart." Crack. The wood snapped with a dry sound. The latch popped off, taking a chunk of rotten wood with it. The door groaned open slightly on unoiled hinges. I held my breath. Had the noise alerted them in the house, I looked back toward William's home. The gangster rap still pounded. Laughter still echoed. Maybe God was using their evil music to cover my rescue. I slipped inside the shed and pulled the door closed behind me. The darkness inside was thick, heavy, suffocating. But what hit me first wasn't the darkness, it was the smell. A horrible mixture that turned my stomach. The smell of rotten wood and old urine. The metallic smell of dried blood. The sharp smell of cheap antiseptic. And underneath it all, the smell of fear and despair. Trembling, I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The cold white beam swept across the small, cluttered room. Torn fertilizer bags. An old mower lying on its side. Garden tools scattered in the dirt. And then the light stopped in the corner where the main support beam stood. My heart stopped beating. William, my tall, strong son, the pride of our family name, was lying there curled up on the cold, filthy floor. He wore only torn shorts. His skin was purple from the cold. His hands were tied behind his back, bound to the post with rough rope that had cut into his wrists until they bled. But the worst part was his right leg. A thick iron chain, the kind used for vicious dogs, was clamped around his ankle. The other end was hooked to an eye bolt driven deep into the concrete floor. The ankle was swollen to twice its normal size, black and purple. The shin below it was twisted at a grotesque, unnatural angle. They'd broken his leg. And they'd left him like that without a splint, without a bandage. Only dried blood caked on his skin. "William," my voice broke. The curled figure jumped. He lifted his head, squinting against the light. His face was gaunt hollow, beard grown out raggedly. One eye was swollen completely shut. The other, that one blue eye I'd looked into the day he was born, stared at me in disbelief. His lips were cracked and white. When he recognized me, that eye opened wide. But not with joy, with terror. "Mom," he rasped, his voice like wind through a cemetery. "Turn off the light. Turn it off, Mom. Run. Please run." I didn't listen. I threw myself to his side, falling to my knees on the cold earth. I cupped his face, that face I'd kissed 1,000 times, that face I'd watched grow from baby to man. My tears fell hot on his cold, bruised cheeks. "Oh God, my baby, what did they do to you? What did they do?" William trembled in my arms. Not from the cold, from fear. He tried to push me away with what little strength he had. "You can't be here. Mom, you don't understand. Rico has a gun. He'll kill you. Please, please go." "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, taking off my jacket and wrapping it around his shaking shoulders. "I'm here now. Nobody's going to kill anybody. I'm getting you out of this hell." I touched his broken leg as gently as I could. William let out a moan of agony, curling tighter. Rage exploded in my chest, burning away every trace of fear. This wasn't domestic violence. This wasn't even assault. This was torture. This was the work of demons. And tonight, those demons were going to pay. "Mom!" William sobbed, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. He rested his head against my shoulder, weak as a small child. "Forgive me. I promised you. I promised to roast you brisket. And look at me, lying here like a dog. Hush now, baby. Don't talk." I stroked his matted hair, feeling the lumps on his skull where they'd beaten him. "Just tell me why. Why did your wife's family do this? Where is Sophie? Does she know?" At the mention of Sophie's name, William went rigid. A different kind of pain, deeper than the physical, appeared in his one good eye. "Sophie," he whispered bitterly. "She knows, Mom. She stood there and watched. She saw them beat me." The words hit me like a bullet. Sophie, the girl who'd called me Mom Grace with such sweetness. The girl I'd taught to make my peach preserves. The girl I'd welcomed into our family with open arms. William struggled to take a breath, and then the story poured out in broken pieces. "Last week, I went down to the company garage to check on the trucks. There'd been late-night runs, strange routes. I saw Rico hanging around. He doesn't work for me, so I got suspicious." He swallowed hard. His throat was so dry it must have hurt to speak. I quickly opened my water bottle and helped him drink. Little sips. I snuck into the back warehouse without them seeing me. I saw Frank and Rico taking the spare tires off the trucks. "Mom," Inside the tires, it was full of packages, white packages, cocaine, pounds and pounds of it. Sweet Jesus, I whispered, crossing myself. I yelled at them. I said I was calling the police. I pulled out my phone. William's voice broke. I didn't expect Frank, my own father-in-law, to hit me from behind with a wrench. I never saw it coming. I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug into my palm. Frank Martinez, the man who'd shaken my hand at William's wedding. The man who'd smiled and called me Familia. That man had beaten my son with a weapon. When I woke up, I was already here, tied up. And Rico? William looked down at his ruined leg and shuddered. Rico was standing over me with a baseball bat. He was smiling, Mom. Smiling. He said, "You like calling the police. I'm going to teach you how to walk carefully." And then he smashed my leg. That son of a... I cursed, my vision going red with rage. I passed out from the pain. Woke up. Passed out again. They took my phone. Rico forced me to unlock it. He's the one who sent you that message. He said if I didn't give him the password to my phone and my company accounts, he'd kill Sophie. He threatened to kill you. William looked at me with his swollen eye, and I saw the guilt there. I was scared, Mom. So scared they'd hurt you. That's why I gave them everything they asked for. And Sophie? I had to ask, even though I dreaded the answer. What did she do? Fresh tears rolled down William's dirty face. She begged her father at first. She cried, but Frank slapped her, told her, "You want to live well or you want the whole family in prison." And just like that, she went quiet. She chose her family over me, Mom. She left me lying here. I felt a chill run down my spine. Betrayal. The poison that kills faster than bullets. They hadn't just broken my son's leg. They'd broken his trust, his heart, his faith in love. What do they want from you? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Why didn't they just kill you? William looked at me with darkness in his eye. Real darkness. The kind that comes from seeing evil up close. If they kill me, the police investigate. The trucking company is in my name. They need the company to launder drug money, to move their cargo across the border. They need me alive, but alive like a zombie. Alive enough to sign papers, but too broken to fight back. He pointed with his chin toward a dark corner of the shed. Look, Mom, look what they're planning for me tonight. I turned the flashlight beam toward where he indicated. On a rotting wooden table sat a metal tray. Inside the tray, a small bag of white powder, a metal spoon with scorch marks underneath, a lighter, and a syringe in a sealed medical package, a drug kit, everything needed to inject heroin. I stared at those objects, feeling dizzy. I'd been a nurse. I'd seen addiction. I'd seen what heroin did to young soldiers in Vietnam, how it hollowed them out and left them shells. They're going to... I couldn't finish the sentence. They're going to inject me, Mom. William said, his voice hollow with despair. Rico said tonight, since it's Christmas Eve, he's going to give me a gift. He wants to turn me into an addict. He wants to make me an animal that begs for drugs at his feet. More tears streamed down his face. If I become an addict, my word means nothing in court. The police will see me as a paranoid junkie accusing his decent in-laws. They'll control me with the drugs. I'll lose everything. The company, my honor, my life, my soul. I looked at my son, an engineer, a businessman, an honest, intelligent man on the verge of being destroyed by poison. The plan wasn't just cruel, it was perfect in its evil. Killing someone requires hiding a body, but destroying someone's soul lets you keep using their body for profit. No, I said, my voice cold and hard as winter steel. I stood up slowly, turning to face my son. There will be no injection. Nobody is going to turn you into an addict. Not while I'm breathing. You don't understand. Rico is coming. He said he'd finish drinking and then come down here to take care of me. You have to go now, Mom, before he... Click. The sound of footsteps outside cut William off. Heavy boots on dry grass. A drunken voice humming. Merry Christmas to my dear brother-in-law. It was Rico's voice, slurred, mean, coming closer. William's one good eye went wide with panic. Mom, hide behind those bags, quick. I looked at my son's chain. No time to break it. I looked around for a weapon. The rusty iron bar. That would have to do. And the knife in my pocket. William whispered urgently, Please, Mom, hide. If he finds you... I turned off the flashlight and pressed it back into my pocket. Then I moved silently, pressing myself into the darkness just behind where the door would open. Right hand gripping the iron bar, left hand on the knife handle. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he'd hear it through my chest. I'm a 68-year-old woman with arthritis and tired eyes. He's a bull of a man, 30 years old, brutal and armed. An unfair fight. But I have two things he doesn't have. Surprise, and the instinct of an old wolf backed into a corner defending her cub. The door burst open. Moonlight flooded in, drawing Rico's shadow on the floor. The smell of alcohol preceded him like a wave. The bloody confrontation was about to begin. Rico stumbled into the shed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in his right hand, a black pistol tucked into his waistband on the left. He didn't turn on any light, maybe from drunken confidence, maybe because he enjoyed watching his victims suffer in darkness. He swayed on unsteady feet, his shadow stretching long across the dirt floor. "Let's see, brother-in-law," he slurred mockingly. "I brought you your medicine, ready to fly to heaven." He lurched toward William, who shrank back against the post, eyes fixed on the gun at Rico's waist. "No, please, Rico." William's voice was desperate, buying time. "Don't call me Rico," the man snarled, raising the bottle for another drink. "Call me boss." He laughed and threw his head back to guzzle the whiskey. That moment when his throat was exposed, his guard completely down, was when I struck. I didn't scream. Smart old women don't scream when they attack. They stay silent and use every ounce of surprise. I put all my weight, all 55 kilograms of old bones and fury, behind the iron bar. Whack! The bar connected with his gun hand wrist with a sickening crack. I felt bone break under the impact. Rico screamed in pain. The pistol flew from his grip, skittering across the concrete floor into the shadows. "What the hell?" He whirled around, eyes bulging in shock. He saw me. A gray-haired old woman with fire in her eyes and an iron bar in her hands. "You—" I didn't give him time to finish. I swung again, this time aiming for his knee. But Rico, despite being drunk, knew how to fight. He jumped back by reflex. The bar only grazed his thigh. He roared with rage and threw the whiskey bottle at my face. I ducked. The bottle exploded against the support beam glass, flying everywhere. Taking advantage of my momentary distraction, Rico charged forward like a bull. The impact sent me crashing backward into the fertilizer bags. My chest felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. I dropped the iron bar, gasping for air. "Old piece of shit!" Rico bellowed, throwing a punch at my face. His fist connected with my cheekbone. Explosion of pain. Stars burst in my vision. I tasted blood in my mouth. He threw himself on top of me, using his massive weight to pin me down. His hands went for my throat, fat, rough fingers wrapping around my windpipe and squeezing. I couldn't breathe. My vision started darkening at the edges. "Mom, no!" William screamed, pulling uselessly at his chains. I could see Rico's face inches from mine. He was grinning a devil's grin. He thought he'd already won. Thought youth and size had crushed age and weakness. But he forgot something. I'm a ranch woman. I've dealt with bulls and heavy timber my whole life, and I have an ace up my sleeve. My right hand fumbled in my jacket pocket. Fingers found the oak handle. Click. The knife opened. I didn't stab wildly. I remembered my training from Vietnam, how to bleed an animal, how to find the vulnerable spots. I needed an artery. Somewhere he couldn't just shrug off the wound. With the last of my strength, I drove the blade upward into the inside of his right thigh, right where the femoral artery runs close to the surface. Squelch. The sound was wet and terrible. Rico's scream split the night, a scream of pure terror. He released my throat immediately, both hands flying to his leg. Blood started spurting out. Hot, bright red. So much blood. I shoved him off me and rolled away, coughing and gasping for air. My throat felt crushed, but I could breathe. Rico tried to stand, but his leg buckled. He fell to his knees, face going pale as milk. His eyes were wide and terrified. "The gun! Where's the gun?" he moaned, looking around frantically, one hand pressed uselessly against the pumping wound. I looked for the pistol, too, there about a yard from William. "William, the gun!" I rasped, my voice barely working. William, despite the pain, reached out with his bound hands. His fingers stretched, strained, finally closed around the weapon. He lifted it with shaking hands and pointed it at Rico. "Freeze!" William's voice was stronger than I'd heard it all night. "Don't you dare move, you bastard!" Rico looked up at the barrel of his own gun, then down at his bleeding leg. All the bravado drained out of him, leaving only cowardice and fear. "Don't shoot, man. It was just a joke, brother-in-law. Just a joke." I pulled myself to my feet, grabbed the iron bar, and walked over to him slowly. Without saying a word, I swung it hard against the back of his skull. Bam! Rico's eyes rolled back. He collapsed like a sack of potatoes, unconscious. I stood there panting. Everything hurt. My face throbbed. My throat felt like it was on fire. I was covered in someone else's blood. But I wasn't disgusted. I felt satisfaction. Dark, primal satisfaction. "It's done," I said to William, my voice hoarse and broken. "Let's get you out of here, baby." But there was no time to rest. From the house I heard shouting. "What was that, Rico?" Frank's voice boomed through the night. I cursed under my breath. Rico's scream had alerted them. We had minutes, maybe seconds. I checked Rico's pockets quickly. Found a key ring. Thank God. Keys to the Ford truck outside. I turned to William. The problem was the chain on his ankle. I didn't have the key to that padlock. "Mom, how am I going to..." William looked at his shackled leg desperately. I examined the setup. The chain was attached to an eye bolt in the concrete floor with a U-shaped shackle held by a threaded nut. "Give me that wrench." "There." I pointed to a rusted tool on the ground. William crawled and grabbed it, passing it to me. I fitted it onto the nut and tried to turn. It was seized up from rust. "Quick, Mom, they're coming," William urged, looking at the door. I gritted my teeth and put all my strength into it. My hand slipped, tearing skin. Blood welled up. I tried again. Finally, the nut turned. Just a little, then more. I kept working it until it came loose. I removed the shackle. The chain fell away from the floor eye bolt, though it still hung from William's swollen ankle. "Good enough, we move now." I helped William stand. He cried out when his broken leg touched the ground. "Lean on me. Hop on your good leg. We don't have a choice." We stumbled out of the shed like two drunks holding each other up. The cold night air hit us. Just then, the back porch light blazed on, flooding the yard with harsh yellow light. "Stop right there." Frank stood at the back door with a double-barreled shotgun pointed straight at us. Beside him, Rosa clutched her chest dramatically. "Kill him. That old bitch killed my baby boy." And behind them, Sophie, her hand over her mouth, face white as snow. "Dad, no." Her voice was barely a whisper. Bang! The shotgun blast hit the dirt at our feet, spraying mud up our legs. Frank was shooting to kill. This man, this father-in-law who'd smiled at our family dinners, was willing to murder his own son-in-law to keep his secret. "Run!" I screamed, pulling William toward the side fence. We crashed through the bushes, thorns tearing at our clothes and skin. Another shotgun blast exploded behind us, wood splintering from a tree branch above our heads. We half ran, half fell around to the front of the house. The 3 black trucks were still there, dark and menacing under the streetlights. I jabbed the key fob. The middle truck's lights blinked. "Get in fast!" I shoved William toward the passenger side, practically throwing him in despite his injured leg. There was no time to be gentle. I jumped behind the wheel, jammed the key into the ignition. The V8 engine roared to life like a beast waking up. Frank came running around the corner of the house, shotgun raised. "Get out of that truck or I'll blow your heads off." I looked him straight in the eyes through the windshield. For just a moment, our gazes locked. His eyes were wild with panic and rage. Mine were cold and determined. "Let's see if your shotgun is faster than this truck," I muttered. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The truck leaped forward like a racehorse tires, squealing. It shot straight toward Frank. His face went from rage to terror in half a second. He dove to the side, hitting the grass hard. The shotgun flew from his hands. We hit the iron gate dead center. Crash! The sound was tremendous metal screaming against metal. The gate tore off its hinges and flew into the street, sparks showering into the darkness. I yanked the wheel, left tires screeching on the cold asphalt. We launched into the night, leaving behind the house of hell, the screams and the betrayal. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No one was following. Yet. Maybe they were too busy dealing with Rico bleeding out. Maybe they were too shocked. I looked at William in the passenger seat. He was gasping, pale as death, clutching his broken leg. The chain still dangled from his ankle, rattling with every bump in the road. Did we make it, Mom?" "Not yet, baby," I said, eyes glued to the dark road ahead. The war is just beginning. But tonight we won the first battle. I reached over and squeezed his cold, trembling hand. The calloused hand of a working mother and the shaking hand of a broken son. We were alive. We were together. And I would die before I let anyone take him from me again. The stolen Ford F-150 roared down the empty highway like a demon fleeing hell. The V8 engine devoured every yard of cold asphalt under headlights that cut through the darkness like knives. I didn't dare slow down, not even a little. In the rearview mirror, the night seemed ready to swallow us whole. I kept expecting pursuit, flashing lights, sirens, gunshots. But behind us, there was only tomb-like silence. In the passenger seat, William was fading. His broken leg was propped awkwardly on the dashboard, the iron chain still clamped around his purple swollen ankle rattling with every bump. Blood from the open wounds had soaked into the expensive leather upholstery. "William, stay awake. Talk to me," I urged, gripping the steering wheel with my right hand while reaching over to pat his cheek with my left. He half opened his eyes, gaze unfocused and distant. "Mom, I'm so cold. I'm so sleepy." "Don't sleep, baby. If you sleep now, you might not wake up." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but fear made me harsh. I knew the symptoms: traumatic shock, blood loss. His body temperature was dropping dangerously. If he lost consciousness now, his heart could stop. I cranked the heater to maximum, but the cold seemed to be coming from inside his body. No amount of warm air could touch it. "Listen to me," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Remember when you were little and you climbed that oak tree, you fell and broke your arm. You cried all day. But the next day you wanted to climb again. You're the stubbornest kid I've ever known. Hold on, baby. Just hold on." William smiled weakly, a crooked smile on his battered face. "That time, you spanked me for tearing my new shirt." Yes, that's right. And this time I'm not going to spank you. I'm going to buy you 10 new shirts. Just keep your eyes open and look at me." I checked the dashboard clock. 3 in the morning. We'd been driving for about 20 miles from that cursed house. I needed a hospital desperately, but I couldn't go to the big hospital downtown. Too many cameras, too many questions. Frank and his family could have connections there. Could find us easily. I vaguely remembered there was a small clinic on the outskirts of a town called Oak Creek, maybe 6 miles ahead. It was the only option I could think of. "We're almost there, baby. You're going to see a doctor. Just hang on." But inside, anxiety burned like acid. In these borderlands, the line between good guys and bad guys was paper thin. Police, doctors, judges, anyone could be on the cartel's payroll if the price was right. I turned off the highway onto a dirt road that led to Oak Creek, raising a cloud of red dust behind us. The Oak Creek Medical Clinic was a single-story building with peeling yellow paint hidden among eucalyptus trees. A flickering blue and white neon sign reading "Emergency" was the only welcome. I parked abruptly in front of the entrance. Didn't even turn off the engine. I jumped out, ran to the passenger side, opened the door, and tried to lift William. He was heavy, a grown man, even weakened, but adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I had. I got him into a fireman's carry, staggering toward the door. "Hang on, baby, just a little bit more." The automatic doors slid open. I stumbled into the fluorescent-lit waiting room. A nurse on duty, maybe 40 years old with tired eyes, jolted awake from where she'd been dozing behind the reception counter. Her eyes went wide when she saw us, a blood-covered old woman carrying a beaten young man with a chain still attached to his leg. She screamed. "My God, what happened?" "Emergency. My son had an accident. Help him, please," I practically shouted, laying William on the nearest gurney. A doctor rushed out from a back room, middle-aged, wearing thick glasses, white coat half-buttoned. He took one look at William's leg, then at the chain, and his expression changed from concern to deep suspicion. "This is not a car accident," he said coldly, touching the compound fracture carefully. William moaned in pain. "These are blunt force trauma injuries. And this chain," he looked up at me sharply. "Who are you people? What happened to him?" "I'm his mother. I just rescued him from kidnappers. Can you please heal his leg before you interrogate me?" The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was out of patience. The doctor stared at me for a long moment, then he nodded to the nurse. "Treatment room. Morphine for pain now. And call the police." "Don't call the local police." I grabbed the nurse's arm before she could pick up the phone. "Call the federal police. DEA. Please." The doctor pulled my hand away firmly. "Ma'am, it's protocol. We have to report all suspicious injuries. They're going to be called whether you like it or not." They wheeled William through double doors into the treatment area. I tried to follow, but the doctor blocked my path. "You need to wait here. We'll take care of him." The doors swung shut, leaving me alone in the cold waiting room. I collapsed into a plastic chair, my whole body suddenly aware of every bruise, every ache. My face throbbed where Rico had hit me. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Dried blood, Rico's blood, was crusted under my fingernails and splattered across my jacket. I pulled out my phone to call David, my old student from the volunteer EMT classes I used to teach. David Stone, who'd joined the DEA and was now a commander in their Special Operations Unit. But my phone was dead. The battery had died somewhere during the rescue. Damn it! I cursed, hitting the useless phone against my palm. Less than 20 minutes passed before I heard sirens outside. 2 Oak Creek Police Department patrol cars screeched to a halt at the entrance. 4 officers climbed out, hands resting on their holstered weapons. The lead officer, a heavy man about 60 years old with a bushy mustache and narrow calculating eyes, walked in first. He scanned the room, then his gaze locked on me. I stood up slowly, instinct screaming that something was wrong. They'd arrived too fast. Way too fast for how slow small-town police usually respond. The commander walked straight to me. Didn't ask the doctor anything. Came directly to me. "You're Grace Thompson." His voice was rough, unfriendly. "Yes. I want to report a crime. My son was kidnapped and tortured by his wife's family." "Shut your mouth." He cut me off rudely. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, property destruction, and aggravated assault." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What, I'm the victim. My son was chained up with a broken leg." The commander smiled coldly, stepping closer to me. He lowered his voice so only I could hear. "The Martinez family already called ahead, old woman. You kicked the wrong hornet's nest. Rico is my drinking buddy, and around here, I'm the law." My blood turned to ice. The local police were bought, completely in the cartel's pocket. This whole town was corrupt. "Cuff her," the commander ordered his subordinates. 2 young officers moved toward me. I'm not a criminal, but I'm also not a sheep being led to slaughter. At that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed the plastic chair and swung it hard at the nearest officer. It connected with his shoulder, making him stumble back. Then I ran. Not toward the exit, they'd catch me there, toward the treatment room where William was. "William, barricade the door!" I screamed. I burst through the double doors into the treatment area and slammed them shut behind me. I threw the bolt lock, thank God there was one, just as the commander's fist hit the other side. "Open this door, you crazy old woman!" The pounding was tremendous. The door shook in its frame. Inside the treatment room, William was on the examination table, his leg freshly bandaged and splinted. The morphine had cleared his head somewhat. The doctor and nurse were pressed against the far wall, terrified. "What the hell are you doing?" the doctor yelled at me. "Shut up and get back if you want to live." I pulled out my knife, not pointing it at them, but at the door. "I'm not going to hurt anyone, but I'm not letting those corrupt cops take my son." I shoved a heavy medicine cabinet in front of the door to reinforce it. The pounding outside intensified. Wood began to splinter. Plaster dust fell from the ceiling. "Mom, what's happening?" William tried to sit up, confused and frightened. "The police. They're working for Rico's family's son. They came to arrest us so the Martinez family can finish what they started." I looked around the room desperately. No exit. The window had security bars. We were trapped like rats. I needed backup, but my phone was dead. I turned to the trembling nurse. "Miss, please, let me borrow your phone. I swear on my life I'm not a criminal. They want to kill my son. Please." Maybe the desperation in my eyes touched her. Maybe she was just too scared to refuse. She pulled her phone from her scrubs pocket with shaking hands and held it out to me. I grabbed it and dialed the number I'd memorized years ago, but never thought I'd use like this. David Stone's number. It rang once, twice. The door was starting to crack under the officer's assault. "Hello?" a deep, authoritative voice answered. "David, it's Grace Thompson." "Grace," he sounded instantly alert, all sleepiness gone. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "Listen carefully, son. I'm at Oak Creek Medical Clinic. My son William, his in-laws broke his leg and tortured him. They're drug runners. The local police are corrupt. They're trying to arrest me right now to protect the cartel. If you don't come, we're going to die tonight." Silence for 2 seconds. Then David's voice came back cold and professional. Barricade yourself in there. Don't open for anyone. I'm calling the nearest rapid response team. 30 minutes. Give me 30 minutes, Grace. I don't know if this door will hold that long. Use everything you have. Do not die. I'm coming. The line went dead. I tossed the phone back to the nurse. 30 minutes. For someone waiting to die, 30 minutes feels like 30 years. The pounding stopped momentarily. Ominous silence. They were planning something. Then I heard the commander's voice through a megaphone outside. Grace Thompson, this is the police. You have 3 minutes to open up and surrender. If you don't, we're coming in with tear gas and force. You're resisting lawful authority. This is your last warning. They were running out of patience. They knew that the longer this dragged on, the more their charade would fall apart. They wanted to end it quickly, kill us, or lock us up before dawn. I looked at the tiny SD card still clutched in my hand, the one William had hidden in his shoe. The evidence that could destroy the Martinez family. But I needed a way to broadcast it, to get it out to the world before we were silenced forever. I looked back at the nurse. Miss, does your phone have social media, Facebook, TikTok? She nodded quickly. Yes. The 4G is slow, but it works. Open it. Start a live stream. Right now. She hesitated, looking at the door, then at me. Maybe ethics won over fear. Maybe she felt pity for a mother trying to save her son. Her fingers flew over the screen. It's live now, she said, voice shaking, turning the camera toward me. I took a deep breath, wiped some of the blood off my face, fixed my gray hair. I didn't want to look like a madwoman. I wanted to look like what I was, a mother. I stared directly into the camera lens, into the eyes of the world. Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Thompson. I'm a mother. Behind me is my son, William. I stepped aside so the camera could see William on the examination table, his splinted leg, the bruises covering his body, the iron chain still clamped around his purple ankle. The image was more powerful than any words could ever be. Look at this, I said, my voice breaking but steady. Look at what his wife's family did to him. They broke his leg. They chained him like an animal in a shed on Christmas Eve, just because he discovered they were trafficking drugs. I held up the SD card. And this is the proof. Video evidence of the Martinez family packaging cocaine. Video of Frank Martinez attacking my son with a wrench. It's all here. I paused, hearing the sound of something heavy hitting the door. They were trying to ram it down now. But you know what's even more evil? The Oak Creek police are outside this door right now. They didn't come to arrest the drug dealers. They came to arrest me and my son, because they work for the cartel. Crash. The door shuttered. A crack appeared in the wood. You hear that they're breaking in. They want to silence us before the truth gets out. I looked straight into the camera, letting all my fear and fury show. If my son and I die tonight, it's because of the Oak Creek Police Department and the Martinez cartel. Please share this video. Don't let our deaths be covered up. I'm Grace Thompson. I'm just a mother trying to save her son. The nurse's finger shook as she hit end broadcast. Posted, she whispered. On the screen, I could see the view count 2,341 viewers, then 5,829, then 12,003. The numbers were climbing fast, exponentially. I smiled despite everything, a tired, grim smile. The world knows now. They can't bury this in the dark anymore. Crash. A small window in the door shattered. Someone threw a tear gas canister through it. The canister hit the floor and started spewing thick white smoke. The chemical smell was instant and overwhelming. We all started coughing. My eyes burned like they were on fire. William doubled over, gasping. The doctor and nurse covered their faces with their hands. "Cover your mouth," I yelled, pulling my jacket up over my nose. But it was useless. The gas filled the small room within seconds. Through my streaming eyes, I saw the door finally give way. The medicine cabinet crashed to the floor. 4 officers in gas masks burst in, batons raised. "Get down on the ground now!" One of them swung his baton at me. I tried to block it with my arm, but the blow caught my shoulder. Pain exploded through my body. I fell to my knees. Another officer hit me with a taser. Electricity coursed through me. Every muscle seized up. I collapsed, convulsing. But even as I fell, even as darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I kept my body between the officers and William. "Don't touch my son," I gasped. The commander stood over me, his baton raised high, ready to bring it down on my skull. I told you, old woman, around here, I am the law. He drew back for the final blow, and then, boom, an explosion shook the entire building. The main entrance door didn't just open, it was blown completely off its hinges. Smoke poured in. But this wasn't tear gas. This was breach smoke. Through it came a voice amplified by speakers, cold and authoritative, cutting through the chaos like a sword. This is the DA. Drop your weapons and put your hands on your heads now. The commander froze, baton still raised above me. Through the clearing smoke, I saw them. A tactical team in black armor with gold letters spelling DEA across their chests. Assault rifles raised. Red laser sights dancing across the chests of every Oak Creek police officer. And at the front of the formation, a tall figure I recognized even through my tear gas blurred vision. David Stone, my former student, holding a pistol with rock-steady hands, his face carved from stone. Drop the baton, David said, his voice absolutely calm, deadly calm, or I treat you as an accomplice to a drug cartel and open fire. The commander's hand trembled. He looked at his little baton, then at the arsenal pointed at him. Clatter. The baton hit the floor. Hands up, now! The commander raised his hands. His knees buckled and he sank to the floor, suddenly looking like what he really was, a small, corrupt coward. Don't shoot. I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect people. David cut him off icily. Not protect drug dealers. Cuff them. All of them. DEA agents swarmed in. The Oak Creek officers were thrown to the ground, arms wrenched behind their backs. The distinctive sound of handcuffs clicking shut, click, 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 was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. David holstered his weapon and rushed to me. He knelt down gently, removing his gas mask so I could see his face. Grace, I'm here. You're safe now. I grabbed his hand, my small, wrinkled, blood-stained hand gripping his large, strong one. David, you came. Just in time. You taught me something years ago, remember? Never abandon someone who needs help. I'm just repaying the debt. He called to the team's medic. Check her, and the man on the table. As a military doctor rushed to examine William and me as the corrupt police were dragged out in handcuffs, as justice finally arrived in the form of federal agents with big guns, I allowed myself to close my eyes. Just for a moment. We'd survived. We'd exposed them. The war wasn't over. But we'd won this battle. And that video, that live stream, it was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. By morning, the whole world would know the truth. While I lay on that clinic floor being examined by the DEA medic while William was being stabilized and prepared for emergency transport, something extraordinary was happening in the digital world. My live stream video, that desperate broadcast from a mother trapped in a room with corrupt police trying to break down the door, had exploded across the internet like a bomb. In the 2 hours since the nurse posted it, the video had been viewed 3 million times, 50,000 shares, and climbing. The hashtag started trending worldwide. #Justice for William #Grace, the warrior #Oak Creek. Corruption had Christmas chain. People from across America, across the world, were watching an elderly woman protect her tortured son while police working for a drug cartel tried to silence them both. The comments flooded in. Oh my God, that poor mother. The police are protecting drug dealers. Share this. Don't let them bury it. Grace Thompson is a hero. This is why we can't trust small-town cops. I'm crying watching this. That's real love. Within hours, mainstream media picked up the story. It was too big, too raw, too real to ignore. CNN, elderly mother rescues son from drug cartel. Fox News, small-town police corruption exposed by viral video. NBC, Texas grandmothers fight against drug lords. BBC, grandmother takes on cartel, a Christmas story of courage. News vans started rolling toward Oak Creek. Reporters from Dallas, Houston, even New York and Los Angeles. They descended on the small town like locusts, cameras and microphones ready. David's team had to set up barricades around the clinic just to keep the press away from us. This is insane, David muttered, watching through the window as more satellite trucks pulled up. Grace, you've become a national story. I was sitting in a chair wrapped in a blanket holding an ice pack to my bruised face. I don't care about being a story. I care about William. He's going to be fine. The helicopter is almost here. We're taking him to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. Best trauma surgeons in Texas. They'll fix his leg. I nodded, relief flooding through me. Then I looked at David seriously. The Martinez family. Are you going after them? David's jaw tightened. We already are. While I was flying here, I had agents raid their house. They're all in custody now. Frank Rosarico if he survived his injuries, and Sophie. Sophie. The name still hurt. The girl I'd welcomed into my family. The girl who'd stood by and watched her family torture my son. What about the evidence, the SD card? We have it. And Grace. David smiled grimly. It's everything we needed. The video shows them clearly packaging cocaine. Shows Frank attacking William with a wrench. Shows them discussing money laundering through William's trucking company. It's airtight. So they can't escape. Not a chance. Between your testimony, William's testimony, the video evidence, and what we found in their house, they're going away for decades. The helicopter landed in the parking lot 20 minutes later, rotors whipping up dust and debris. Military paramedics loaded William onto a stretcher. He was conscious now, the morphine helping with the pain. "Mom," he called out weakly as they wheeled him toward the helicopter. I walked beside the gurney holding his hand. "I'm right here, baby. You saved me. You actually saved me." "Of course I did. You're my son. I'd walk through hell to save you." He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby. Now rest. Let the doctors fix you up." They loaded him into the helicopter. David helped me climb in after him. As we lifted off into the dawn sky, I looked down at Oak Creek, that small town where corruption had festered for so long. But not anymore. The light was shining on them now, and there was nowhere left to hide. While we flew to San Antonio, David showed me helmet cam footage from the raid on the Martinez house. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, holding up a tablet. The video started with DEA agents surrounding the house at dawn, the same house where I'd been turned away at gunpoint just hours before. The gate I'd smashed through was still lying in the street. DEA federal warrant opened the door. The battering ram made short work of the front door. Agents flooded in, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Frank Martinez was in the kitchen trying to burn papers in the fireplace. When he saw the agents, he froze, hands full of half-burned documents. "On the ground now!" Frank dropped the papers and fell to his knees. "I want my lawyer. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer." "You'll get your lawyer. After we process you for drug trafficking, kidnapping, torture, and attempted murder." Rosa was found over the bedroom, frantically packing a suitcase. "We have to get to Mexico. We have to," she screamed when agents grabbed her arms and cuffed her. Rico was on the couch in the living room, his leg wrapped in bloody towels. He'd survived the stab wound, but barely. Paramedics were already working on him while an agent read him his rights. "Ricardo Martinez, you're under arrest for aggravated kidnapping, torture, assault with a deadly weapon, drug trafficking, and attempted murder of a federal witness." Rico just stared at the ceiling, his face gray. He didn't even try to resist. But the most heartbreaking part came next. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table completely still, not running, not packing, just sitting there with her head in her hands. When the agents approached her, she stood up calmly and held out her wrists. "I know," she said quietly. "I know why you're here. Sophie Martinez, you're under arrest. I understand. I deserve it." As they cuffed her, she looked directly at the camera one of the agents was wearing. "Grace," she said, tears streaming down her face. "William, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what my family did. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stop them. I was a coward. I chose wrong." The agent started to lead her away, but Sophie pulled back for a moment. "Tell William. Tell him he deserves better than me. Tell him I hope he finds someone who has the courage I didn't have." Then she walked out quietly, head bowed. Watching it, I felt something complex twist in my chest. Anger, pity, sadness. Sophie had made terrible choices, but she was also a victim of her family's evil in a way. David stopped the video. The search of the house was even more productive. "Want to see?" The next footage showed agents breaking open a false floor in the garage. Underneath was a bunker containing over 100 kilograms of cocaine, 40 kilograms of heroin, 3 AK-47 rifles, $500,000 in cash, ledgers documenting drug sales going back 5 years. "That's enough to put them away for life," David said. "Multiple life sentences for Frank and Rico. Rosa and Sophie will get lighter sentences, but they're still looking at serious prison time." I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. Justice was coming. Finally. Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio was a massive facility, a place I knew well from my nursing days. They'd treated soldiers there for generations. William was rushed into surgery immediately. The doctor said his leg was badly damaged, the bones needed to be pinned and aligned, tendons repaired, infection treated. He's young and strong, the lead surgeon told me. With physical therapy, he should recover most function. He'll walk with a slight limp, but he'll walk. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. The surgery took 6 hours. I spent every minute of it in the waiting room, unable to sleep despite David's urging. Grace, you need to rest. You're injured too. I'm fine. You have bruised ribs, a possibly fractured cheekbone, and taser burns. You're not fine. I'll rest when I see my son awake and safe. David sighed but didn't argue further. He just sat with me, this man who'd been my student years ago and was now my protector. You know, I said after a long silence, when you were young and came to my volunteer EMT classes, you were so angry, so lost after your parents died. David smiled slightly. I remember. You told me channel that anger into helping people, not hurting them. Best advice I ever got. And look at you now, a DEA commander, saving lives. Your parents would be so proud. I learned from the best, Grace. We sat together in comfortable silence until finally the surgeon emerged. Mrs. Thompson. The surgery went well. Your son is in recovery. You can see him soon. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. When I was finally allowed into William's room, he was groggy but awake. His leg was in a cast, elevated and wrapped in fresh bandages. The chain was finally gone, cut off by the medical team. I pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand. Hey, baby, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, he mumbled. Then his eyes focused on me, really looked at me. Mom, you're hurt. Your face? I'm fine, just some bruises. You fought Rico. You stabbed him to save me. I did what I had to do. William's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. If I'd just been smarter, if I'd seen what they were... Hush now. This wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known your wife's family were monsters. Sophie. He said her name with such pain. She betrayed me, Mom. She watched them break my leg and said nothing. I squeezed his hand. I know, baby. And that hurts more than any physical wound, doesn't it? He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I loved her. I thought we'd grow old together, have kids, and she just abandoned me. Love doesn't mean we're blind to betrayal. You can love someone and still recognize when they failed you, and you can forgive them without taking them back. Can I forgive her? That's up to you, son. Forgiveness is for your peace, not hers. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You can forgive her and still walk away. In fact, that's probably the healthiest thing you can do. William was quiet for a long moment. Then, the company. They used my company for drug trafficking. It's probably going to be seized. We'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, you focus on healing. We'll rebuild. Together. Together, he echoed, closing his eyes. I sat with him until he fell asleep, my hand never leaving his. The story exploded even bigger over the next few days. The video had been viewed 50 million times. My face, this old, wrinkled, bloodied face, was on every news channel. People were calling me everything from warrior grandmother to Texas hero to the mother we all need. I received hundreds of thousands of messages from around the world. From Maria in Mexico. Your son was taken by a cartel 2 years ago. Police said they couldn't find him. But seeing you fight gives me hope. I won't give up. From Sarah in Canada. I'm 72 years old. Everyone says I'm weak and useless. But watching you reminds me age doesn't define us. Our hearts do. Thank you. From David Nguyen in Vietnam. Thank you for your service in Vietnam all those years ago. Thank you for showing the world what American mothers are made of. Reading these messages in my hospital room, tears rolled down my face. I didn't do anything special, I told the nurse. I just saved my son. Ma'am, the nurse said gently, that's exactly why people love you. You didn't do it for glory, you did it for love. And that's what makes it special. Publishers started calling. 5 different companies wanted me to write a book. Talk shows wanted interviews. Oprah's people reached out. I don't want to be famous, I told David. I just want William to heal and this nightmare to be over. I understand, but Grace, your story is giving hope to people who feel powerless, to elderly people who society ignores, to parents fighting for their kids. That matters. Maybe, I admitted, maybe I'll do one interview, one book. If it helps someone else's child get saved, it'll be worth it. 3 days after the rescue, we held a press conference at DEA headquarters in Dallas. David stood at a podium covered with microphones, cameras flashing continuously. After 4 days of investigation, the DEA has successfully dismantled the Martinez drug trafficking organization operating in Oak Creek and surrounding areas. We've arrested 4 family members, 6 corrupt police officers, and seized over 180 pounds of narcotics, $700,000 in cash, multiple weapons and vehicles. The room erupted with questions. Agent Stone, how did you discover the corruption? We were alerted by Grace Thompson, whose son William Thompson was kidnapped and tortured by the organization. Mrs. Thompson showed remarkable courage in rescuing her son and exposing this criminal enterprise. Can we speak with Mrs. Thompson? David looked at me. I was sitting in a chair to the side, still bruised and bandaged, but dressed in my best blouse. I stood up slowly and approached the microphone forest. The flashing intensified. Questions shouted from every direction. Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to be called a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who did what any mother would do, protect her child. Mrs. Thompson, were you scared? Terrified. But fear doesn't matter when your child's life is on the line. Love is stronger than fear. What do you want to say to other parents out there? I looked directly into the cameras, into the eyes of millions watching. Never give up on your children. Never assume you're too old, too weak, too powerless to help them. When your child is in danger, you'll find strength you never knew you had. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't be afraid to fight even against corrupt authority when you know you're right. The room was silent for a moment. Then applause broke out. Not from reporters, they're supposed to stay neutral, but from the DEA agents lining the walls. They were clapping for an old woman who'd taken on a cartel. David stepped back to the microphone. We'll now take questions about the investigation itself. As I sat back down, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride exactly, but a sense of purpose. Like maybe my fight hadn't just saved William. Maybe it had meant something bigger. 3 months later, winter had turned to early spring. William was walking again with a cane and a limp, but walking. The doctors said he'd made remarkable progress. The leg would never be perfect, but it was functional. We'd lost the trucking company. It had been seized as part of the criminal proceedings. But William was already talking about starting over, maybe something completely different. I'm thinking about teaching, he'd told me. Teaching business ethics at the community college. Maybe I can help young people avoid making the mistakes I made. That sounds perfect, baby. But today wasn't about new beginnings. Today was about justice. The federal courthouse in San Antonio was packed, every seat in the gallery filled. News cameras lined up outside, protesters holding signs, "Justice for William," and "Lock them up." I sat in the front row, William beside me in his wheelchair. He still used it for long periods. David sat on my other side in full DEA dress uniform. The defendants were brought in all wearing prison jumpsuits and shackles. Frank Martinez looked like he'd aged 20 years. His face was gaunt eyes, hollow. He stared at the floor. Rosa Martinez was crying, mascara running down her face. She kept looking around as if searching for sympathy. Rico Martinez El Escorpion glared at everyone with pure hatred. His leg was still bandaged from where I'd stabbed him. He'd survive, unfortunately for him. He'd survive to spend decades in prison. And Sophie. She walked in last, head bowed, refusing to look up. She'd lost weight. Her beautiful hair hung limp. She looked broken. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. All rise. Federal District Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Patricia Reeves presiding. We all stood. The judge sat and we followed. We're here for the trial of United States versus Frank Martinez, Ricardo Martinez, Rosa Martinez, and Sophie Martinez on charges of drug trafficking, conspiracy, kidnapping, torture, and various other federal crimes. How do the defendants plead? The defense attorney, an expensive lawyer in a designer suit, stood up. Your Honor, my clients plead not guilty to all charges. A murmur went through the courtroom. Not guilty. With all that evidence, the lawyer continued. We will prove that William Thompson staged this entire scenario to frame the Martinez family. that he was involved in drug trafficking himself and created this elaborate hoax to avoid prosecution, that the so-called torture was self-inflicted. Objection. The federal prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We have video evidence, which we will prove was edited and manipulated, the defense lawyer interrupted. Judge Reeves banged her gavel. That's enough. Save your arguments for trial. Prosecution, call your first witness. The United States calls William Thompson. William stood slowly, gripping his cane. I helped him to his feet. He looked at me and I saw fear in his eyes. You can do this, baby, I whispered. Tell the truth. That's all you need to do. He nodded and made his way to the witness stand. The bailiff helped him up the steps. After being sworn in, William sat down and looked out at the packed courtroom. His eyes passed over the Martinez family without stopping. The prosecutor approached. Mr. Thompson, please tell the court what happened to you on December 15th of last year. William took a breath and began. I discovered my father-in-law and brother-in-law packaging cocaine into the spare tires of my company's trucks. When I threatened to call the police, Frank Martinez attacked me from behind with a wrench. When I woke up, I was chained in a shed. Rico Martinez broke my leg with a baseball bat and told me he was going to force me to become a drug addict so I couldn't testify against them. His voice was steady, strong. He wasn't the broken man I'd found in that shed anymore. The prosecutor played the video from the SD card. The entire courtroom watched as Frank and Rico packaged drugs, as William entered and shouted, as Frank struck him from behind with brutal force. The video was damning, incontrovertible. Several jurors looked away, disturbed by the violence. Then the defense lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mr. Thompson, isn't it true that you were prescribed oxycodone after a car accident in 2022, an opioid painkiller? Yes, but I took it as prescribed and stopped after 2 weeks. Can you prove that? Yes. Hospital records and blood tests when I was admitted to DEA custody show I had no drugs in my system. The lawyer's face fell slightly. And isn't it true that your mother, Grace Thompson, has a history of violence, that she carries a knife? Objection. The prosecutor stood. Relevance goes to character, Your Honor. I'll allow it. But make your point quickly, counselor. The defense lawyer turned back to William. Your mother carries a knife and used it to stab my client, didn't she? My mother, William said clearly, is a 70-year-old woman who served as an army nurse in Vietnam. She carried a knife for medical purposes and self-defense. She used it to save my life when your client was strangling her to death. That's not violence. That's heroism. Applause broke out in the gallery. The judge banged her gavel for silence, but I saw the smallest smile on her face. The defense lawyer tried a few more angles, but nothing worked. William was unshakable. Finally, the prosecutor called me to the stand. I walked up slowly, my arthritis acting up, but my back straight. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Thompson, please tell the court how you came to rescue your son. I told them everything. The suspicious text message, the phone call with Sophie, my instincts telling me something was wrong, finding William chained in the shed, fighting Rico, the escape, the corrupt police, David's rescue. And Mrs. Thompson, why did you risk your life for your son? I looked at the prosecutor like he'd asked the stupidest question in the world. Because he's my son. That's what mothers do. We protect our children, no matter what. When the defense lawyer tried to cross-examine me, I met his eyes steadily. Mrs. Thompson, you stabbed my client nearly to death. I stabbed him in self-defense when he was strangling me. The femoral artery wound was precise because I'm a trained combat nurse. If I'd wanted him dead, he'd be dead. I wanted him alive to face justice, which is what's happening right now. The lawyer had no response to that. The trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, the testimony, the drugs found in their house, the ledgers. The corrupt police who'd already pled guilty and were testifying against the Martinez family to get lighter sentences. On the morning of the 4th day, the jury came back after only 2 hours of deliberation. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of drug trafficking against Frank Martinez, how do you find guilty? On the charge of kidnapping, guilty. On the charge of torture, guilty. It went on, guilty, 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 for every charge, for every family member. Frank Martinez slumped in his chair, face in his hands. Rico stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, trying to maintain his tough guy image. Rosa sobbed loudly, wailing about her babies. And Sophie. Sophie just sat there, tears streaming silently down her face. When the verdict was read for her charges guilty of conspiracy and failure to report a crime, she nodded as if she'd expected it, as if she agreed she deserved it. Judge Reeves looked at each defendant in turn. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks, but let me say this. Now you people represent everything wrong with our society. You chose greed over decency. You chose violence over love. You destroyed a young man who had the courage to stand up to you. And you would have gotten away with it if not for the courage of one elderly woman. She looked at me. Mrs. Thompson, you remind us all that real strength isn't about size or youth. It's about character, about love, about refusing to give up. This court commends you. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. Frank Martinez, 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 20 years. Ricardo Martinez, 30 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 25 years. Rosa Martinez, 15 years in federal prison, possibility of parole after 10 with good behavior. Sophie Martinez, 5 years in federal prison, possibility of parole after 2 with good behavior. As they were led away, Sophie stopped. She turned and looked at William. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. William looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Just once. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement of what was, of what could never be again. And then she was gone. 6 months after the trial, spring had turned to early summer. I stood on the porch of my ranch house looking out at the Texas landscape I loved. The wildflowers were in full bloom, bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush covering the hills in blue and orange. William was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, planting vegetables. He'd moved back to the ranch after everything fell apart. He was teaching online classes now and seemed happier than he'd been in years. "Mom," he called, "come look at these tomatoes. They're already getting big." I walked over my own arthritis, feeling better in the warm sun. "Your father would be so proud of this garden. I learned from the best." He stood up, brushing dirt off his jeans. He still limped, but it was barely noticeable now. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about dating again." I smiled. "Oh, there's a teacher at the community college. Emily. She volunteers at a domestic violence shelter. She's kind, strong, real. She sounds wonderful, baby. I'm nervous, though. After Sophie, that's natural. But you can't let one person's betrayal close your heart forever. Emily sounds like the kind of woman who would fight beside you, not hide behind her family." Yeah, I think she is." We worked in the garden together in comfortable silence. Father and son in the past. Now mother and son healing together. That evening we had visitors. David pulled up in his truck, bringing his wife, a lovely woman named Sarah, who was a pediatric nurse. Behind them came 3 other cars' families I'd helped through the Second Chance Center William and I had opened with money from my book deal. The book, The Christmas Chain, A Mother's Fight for Justice, had become a bestseller. Not because I was a great writer, but because people connected with the story. With the idea that love could overcome evil. We'd used the money to open a counseling center for domestic violence victims and people affected by drug violence. David's wife volunteered there. William taught budgeting classes. I did peer counseling. Tonight was a celebration. 1 year since that terrible Christmas Eve. We gathered around a fire pit in the yard. I'd made my famous peach preserves and biscuits. William had grilled ribs, finally keeping that promise to cook the Christmas dinner we'd never had. As the sun set and the fire crackled, David stood up with his beer. "I want to make a toast to Grace Thompson, the bravest person I know, and to William, who survived hell and came out stronger, and to second chances, to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," everyone echoed. We drank and ate and laughed under the stars. Children played tag in the yard. Someone brought out a guitar. The night was perfect. Later, when most people had gone home, William and I sat by the dying fire, wrapped in blankets. "Mom, yes, baby, thank you. For not giving up on me. For trusting your instincts. For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself." I squeezed his hand. "Always, William. Always." "Do you have any regrets about that night?" I thought for a long moment. "Not one. Everything led us here. Your leg will always remind you of what happened. My face will always have scars, but we're alive. We're together. We're rebuilding. And we're helping others. I can't regret that." What about Sophie? Do you think about her? Sometimes. I hope she finds peace in prison. I hope she learns to stand up for what's right instead of what's easy. But she's not part of our story anymore. William nodded. I forgave her. Not for her sake, for mine. But you're right, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back. It just means I'm not carrying that weight anymore. That's very wise, son. We sat in comfortable silence watching the stars. After a while, William spoke again. You know what the weirdest part is? I'm happier now than I was before all this happened. I lost my company, my wife, almost my life. But I found myself. I found purpose. I found out what really matters. And what's that? Family. Real family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. You, David, Emily, the people at the center. That's my real family now. Tears pricked my eyes. That's beautiful, baby. Before bed, I walked to the small shrine I'd made in the living room. Photos of James, my late husband. His old cowboy hat on a hook. His favorite coffee mug. James, I whispered. I kept my promise. I protected our boy. He's safe now. He's happy. You'd be so proud of him. I could almost feel James's presence. Almost hear his voice. I'm proud of you too, Grace. Always have been. I smiled through my tears and kissed his photo. Then I went to my bedroom, crawled under the quilts I'd made years ago, and fell asleep with a peaceful heart. Christmas Eve came around again, but this year was different. My ranch house was filled with lights and laughter. David and Sarah and their new baby. William and Emily, who were engaged now, planning a summer wedding. 5 families from the Second Chance Center. My neighbors from down the road. The house was warm. The trees sparkled. Christmas music played softly, not gangster rap, but Silent Night and Joy to the World. William stood by the grill outside, carefully tending his brisket, the one he'd promised me 2 years ago. It's ready, everyone. We gathered around the long table I'd set up on the porch. The food was laid out like a feast. As we took our seats, William stood up to speak. 2 years ago, I made a promise to my mom that we'd have this Christmas dinner. Life had other plans. I ended up chained in a shed, broken and hopeless. But my mom, this incredible, unstoppable woman, saved my life. She fought off a drug dealer, escaped corrupt police, and never gave up on me. He looked at me with shining eyes. Mom, this brisket is 2 years late, but I finally kept my promise. I stood up, tears rolling down my face, and hugged my son. My strong, good son who'd survived hell and come out better for it. It was worth the wait, baby. It was worth everything. As we sat down to eat, I looked around at all these people, this chosen family, this community built on shared pain and healing. Wait, I said. Before we eat, I want to say something. Everyone quieted and looked at me. My name is Grace Thompson. I'm a mother. I'm 69 years old now, and I want to tell everyone watching this story because I know some of you will share. It will tell others. I want you to know this. You're never too old to fight for what matters. You're never too weak to protect the people you love. Don't ever let anyone tell you that age makes you powerless. Our bodies may slow down, but our hearts, our determination, our love, those only get stronger. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't be afraid to stand up to authority when they're wrong. Don't be afraid to fight not with violence first, but with courage, with truth, with persistence. And most importantly, love is not just words. Love is action. Love is showing up. Love is refusing to give up. Love is walking through fire if that's what it takes to save the people who matter. I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who did what needed to be done. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to fight for their loved one, then everything we went through was worth it. The table was silent for a moment. Then everyone raised their glasses. To Grace, they called out. To love, David added. To family, Sarah said. To second chances, Emily finished. We drank and ate and celebrated life. The brisket was perfect, tender and smoky and delicious. James would have approved. As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, William pulled me aside. Mom, I got you something, a Christmas gift, a real one this time. He handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver necklace with a pendant. The pendant was shaped like a broken chain, beautiful in its brokenness, elegant in its destruction. The artist made it from the actual chain that was on my ankle, William explained. It's a reminder that what was meant to destroy us made us stronger, that broken things can become beautiful. I put it on, tears streaming down my face. It's perfect, baby. Absolutely perfect. We stood together on the porch, mother and son looking out at the starry Texas night. Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, my brave, beautiful boy. And for the first time in 2 years, Christmas felt truly peaceful, truly joyful. We'd been through hell. We'd been broken. We'd been tested in ways most people never are. But we'd survived. And we'd become something stronger than we were before. Not because of the pain, but because we'd faced it together. Because love had won. Love always wins in the end. Always.